So in the last class we have seen what are remote objects, and I have already told you that when we talk about the remote object, the client need not be always remote. What is the meaning of that? A client can communicate with this beam via a separate client heap. That means the client can be there on some other machine which is running its own JVM, or the client can be there on the same server heap. That means the client is running directly on the same JVM. There are two different scenarios. Now, if it is a remote client, then by now we are already familiar that for a remote client, we need a component interface that is taken up by the stub. It takes the request from the client and then proxies it to the remote object, that is the EJB object. EJB object in turn delivers it to the beam. This is the case where we have the client at the remote location. Now what will happen if the client is there on the same heap as that of the server? In this case, we don't require the stub to interact with the client, to interact with the beam. The reason is there is no need for the proxy because the client can always see the beam. So in this case, we don't have the stub, but the client still uses the EJB object and then calls the method on the beam. So if it is this kind of view, we call it as a local view. So we can have either a remote client or we can have a local client. The difference is when we say it is a remote client, we need a stub that will proxy the remote object. And when we say that it is a local client, there is no need of that stub. So if at all you are developing a local client, and what will be the difference between the remote client and the local client? The difference is the interfaces. Now when we talk about the remote client somehow has to make use of the java.rmi, that is the SDK version. So any remote connection must go with the Java RMI, so there is no other standards. So we require any of the interface to be somehow derived out of this remote. So it is required because that's the specification of the Java. Whereas when we talk about the client view, that is a local view, there is no need to have this remote interface. So that is the major difference. So all the classes or all the objects that you derive out of this class, they need not be somehow their parents need not be the remote interface. Whereas when it comes to the remote client, it is always required. So for a local client like this, there is no need of that remote. So local client can directly take it. Now usually what we are doing is, in order to differentiate between the remote client and the local client, we use the word local here to just make the differentiation. That is not absolutely required. So just to, so that it is not confusing for us when we develop. So when we say if it is a local access, we always say it is a local, and if it is a remote access, we just add the tag. It is not a mandatory that it is really required. Okay, so let's look at the EJB life cycle, how the things will work. Now we are already familiar. So first of all, the client has to get the reference for the given object, or the client has to look up for the home beam. So the client, what is the first thing the client will do is it will look up for the home object. Now, I think I've already told you, the looking up, when I say it is looking up for something, it is searching for the given beam. So if at all you want to execute a program, or if at all you want to print a document, you will first search for that name within your directory, and that is what is being performed in the JNDI. So it goes and it looks up for the given bean. So once it looks up, remember when it goes to the home object, I've already told you one of the work of this home object is to give the reference of the component interface. What's the meaning of that? I'll just go back by 2 steps. The work of this home object is to give this stuff to the client, and its work is over. In turn, it may instantiate all those things, but one of the major work that it is doing is it gives the component interface to the client side. That is what it is supposed to do. So when the client looks up for a given bean, so it searches in the directory where is that bean. If it is found, what the JNDI will do is it will give that home interface to the client. Remember, I've slightly gone, you may say that what is the use of that home interface. If I go back, I will show the full fledged view. We have just skipped that part. Okay. This is what is happening. Now, when the client is making the first request, or when it searches for this one, first of all, it has to interact with it. The JNDI, what it does is it provides the stub of this home object. So then the client calls a create method, then everything shoots up. So this is what is happening. So that is what is shown here. Go quickly to that slide. So here it gives the interface to that. Then the client calls a create on the home object. So first it gets the home interface, and then this home interface. Now the call is with the home interface. Let's go over here. In order to interact with this home object, the client has to get a reference to this. So what the JNDI is doing is it gives this home stuff to the client side. The client then issues a create on that home stuff, and then all the activities fire up. So it goes here. So we got the home interface. The client then calls a create on this home interface. Now the action begins. The home interface first goes and creates the bodyguard for the EJB object. Again, I will go back, maybe a bit distracting, but let's see. When the create object is, when the EJB create is called on this home object, it creates this bodyguard. It creates the instance of this bean, and then it has to supply this stuff, and that is what it's going to do now. So you got the home interface, you call a create on that. The create will create that bodyguard, then it will instantiate the bean. There is a bean class, it creates an object. Okay. Let's say it creates a session bean. That's not the end of it. That step is not shown. In the previous cartoons you've seen, only the service is being shown up. What is happening within that service? Within the service, it provides a context. Now, what is the meaning of saying the context? Context is the entire environment in which the bean is supposed to execute. The environment includes the protection, that is the security, it may be the transaction, it may be the persistence. All the entire environment in which the bean has to be provided is supplied by that context. So it receives this session context, okay, and then it calls the EJB create on the session object. So the client has called a create on the home object. Now this home object calls EJB create on the session bean itself. Now what is this? Remember, slightly going one step ahead, one step back. In the initial state, it creates a new instance. What's the meaning of saying new instance? Is it calls the constructor of the bean to create a new instance. So this is the call of the constructor. So when the constructor is called, this is what happens. Then it calls it sets the context. No other methods are called. So the server or the container will guarantee that the steps are followed, the strict steps are followed. So when the bean is instantiated, so that means the object is there in the memory, but the server will see to it that nobody will call any method on that object. So nobody is allowed to call any method on it until it finishes its work. What is its work? It sets the context. So nobody is allowed to touch the bean. The context is set. Then it calls a separate method called as EJB create. So until now, nobody is allowed to interact with the bean. So it is completely maybe placed in a separate cell. It creates everything. The bean is ready after this. After this, anybody is allowed to make any call. So this is what this is what is guaranteed by the server. So the server or the container will ensure that the object is instantiated, the context is given, and a method called as create, that is EJB create, is called. Now, why all these steps are required? I'll talk about it slightly later. It calls that method. It's called as callback method. Okay. You are supposed to write something on inside that method. You may, or as a developer, you are supposed to write that some steps in that. But it calls that method. As of now, it calls that method. Then, what this home object will do is, after this, it gives the signal to the home object that everything is over. I'm ready or that bean is ready for taking any action. So the home object now sends the remote interface, that is the component interface to the client side. And what is this step? It sends the stub of the client to the client side. It sends the stub to the client side and then says, this is a proxy object. Now make a call via this proxy object. The client will make a call and it goes to the bodyguard, and bodyguard gives it to the session bean. The session bean performs something and then returns it back to the client. So there is a way in which the things will perform, and this is called as the life cycle. In other words, the server or the container maintains the life cycle. Life cycle is the steps in which the methods are called. So there is always a sequence in which the method is called, and the sequence is automatically maintained by the container. That is why we say that container provides the services for different life cycle or different steps within the life cycle. Let's look at how do we have to implement a session bean. In order to implement a session bean, we have to call EJB create. Now we are supposed to write that EJB create. Now this step EJB create is called by the container. In particular, even though we say that home object is called, it is called by the container. Now this is called as callback. If you write that method, the container will call that method. You are supposed to write it. So it is you can't say I am not going to write it. You are supposed to write it. The container will call. Whatever steps that you have written inside that method will be performed first. So this is what is the meaning. Now you may be thinking, okay, there is this constructor that creates the object. Then why do we have to call this EJB create again before calling anything? Why can't I put everything in the constructor? Remember, constructor, as of definition, constructor is there to just make the instance of the object. You are not supposed to do heavy duty work in the constructor. What's the meaning of saying heavy duty work? You are not supposed to go and try to wait for external resources, or you are not supposed to go and make a connection with the database and other things. This is going to delay the creation of the object. Remember, JVM is very busy trying to instantiate the object. If you block the JVM for in creation of one of the object, every other things will get blocked. So you must say to it that it's lightweight. It just gets a memory map. That's all. Then afterwards, you try to call some methods which will do the housekeeping work. So all these things, by now you are familiar. The context. Now remember, you can't set a context to the, or you can't give a context to a object until it is created. So only once you have an object, then you can tell the object that, say, you are supposed to work in this environment. The object is not created. You can't say that you are supposed to work in this environment. So the constructor is called, then the next step is called. Now this is done by the server side. Now from your side, what is that you are supposed to do? You remember, whenever you are thinking of doing some business processing, you require a database connection, you may require a transaction, you may require some persistence. That thing has to be written inside this EJB create. This is the method in which you are supposed to do the routine housekeeping work. So don't push these things into the constructor. Instead of that, EJB create is where you make anything, any sort of routine, the set of work that you want to do it, you can do it. Now you have nothing to be done, then just write the method name, that's all. Keep the method and the method is called, but no action is performed. It just control enters the method, just returns back. But you are supposed to write that method because that method will be called before calling any other method within your bean. So that is a must. Okay. So that is what you are supposed to do. Apart from this, there are additional methods that you are supposed to write. What are the additional methods? One is EJB activate, EJB passivate, EJB remove. So this set context is the method that is used to set the context here. This method is already there. Now what is this EJB activate and EJB passivate? EJB activate is called when some event occurs. EJB passivate also is called when certain event occurs. Now, assume that we have a session bean, that is the stateful session bean, and you are already familiar, stateful session beans are dedicated to a given client, and the client starts interacting with the session bean. Assume that it is again a stateful bean, and then the client goes up. Maybe the client is not responding. The simplest scenario is the client comes in to a mail server, opens the inbox, reads the mail, then he starts replying it back to the mail. So when he is replying it back, he or she is replying back, they're going to take a lot of time for the next interaction. So there will be an immediate interaction, then there will be a long pause, then maybe the interaction occurs again. Now during this long pause, maybe 15 or 10 or 15 minutes, the session bean on the server must be kept on the memory. And you know very well, the server, the RAM or the primary memory is really very important because the server is not just responding it back to one client, it is responding it to maybe billions of users at a time. So one of the user comes, activates the bean and then goes out. But the server has to pay the price for keeping this session bean active because the session bean, in particular the stateful session bean, can't be given to the other client. Now what the server now does is, instead of deleting that bean, remember you can't just destroy the bean, because if it destroys the bean, all the client interaction, all the state of the client is destroyed along with the bean. So it can't destroy it. It has to keep it active until the client exclusively says that no, I don't want to interact with it, or I'm logging out, then it can withdraw it. Now, as long as the client is there, it has to maintain it, but it is running out of memory now. So what it's going to do now is, instead of keeping the state of the client in the RAM, it serializes the content to the disk, either to a database or to a file. So it takes the state, whatever the state that bean has, or what is the meaning of saying state? All the fields or all the fields within your object, the values which are there in the field, all of them are removed out and then stored into the permanent storage device. So in other words, it serializes your bean or the session bean into the disk so that that much of space can be allotted to someone else. And this is what is called as passivation. So passivation is nothing but swapping your bean out of memory into the disk storage. So when the passivation occurs, so when the client, when the server decides, you are not deciding as a programmer, you can't decide it. It's up to the container, or it's up to the server to take this action. So just before writing the state of your session bean to the disk, it makes one call, and that call is the EJB passivate. This is a chance that is given to the bean to do some housekeeping work before its state is written back to the disk. What is the meaning of it? Remember, there is no point in serializing everything from the session bean directly onto the disk. There are some things which are not really required. Which are those some things? The connection with the database. So you make a connection, establish a connection with the database. That thing need not be stored to the disk. What is the reason? You may be, if you try to store the connection, so your bean starts, it makes a connection with the database. That means there is a hook with the database, and the server takes that bean, passivates it onto the disk. How long that it's going to be there, I'll tell you. It will be there until the client comes back again. So this, if the connection with the database is also stored, you may be able to reclaim the memory. But what is happening to the database there? The database has one active connection with one of its client. In this case, the client is the your bean, but the bean has gone out. So it is not there in the memory. You know very well, as and when more and more connections are established with the database, or in other words, as many clients interact with the database, the performance of the database itself degrades. So there is a scalability issue with all the databases. Now, if you don't close the connection with the database, what will happen is the database will maintain one connection with the client or with the session bean, which is not there in the memory. It's a load on the database. Again, if you think that you assume the other scenario wherein you have you have opened a file for an exclusive access, maybe in the read-only mode, you have opened it. Now, because your bean is being sent to the disk, or it is being serialized to the disk, or in other words, in a very simple way, you can say it is being sent to a sleep mode. So, in the sleep mode, there is no need to have a open exclusive open file access mode, because you are not going to perform anything. So these things has to be closed. There is no point in serializing those things. You can say that these are 10 files are open. I have a 10 exclusive read access on 10 files. There is no need for that, because you can close it. Maybe you can access allow the others to make use of those connections. So just before your bean is getting serialized, the server will give you a chance to disconnect either from the database or maybe close the files and other things. You can re-establish it back later, but as of now, because your bean is sent out of the memory, you can just close it. Now this, you have to do it, because the server can't predict what are the things that are required exclusively for your business logic. Server knows that, okay, you have a int, you have a float, you have some object which is there in the stack or which is there in the heap, and it just pulls out those values and dumps it onto the disk. But it can't go on your behalf. It can't go to the database and say that, okay, disconnect this connection. Then the database say, who are you to ask for that? Let the client ask me that I want to disconnect, then I will disconnect. So server, there are some restriction on the server. So the server or the container can't just go to the database and can't just forcefully close some files. So it is not allowed. So within your program, because your program has the privilege, or your session bean has a privilege, it can close it. So your client has opened a email inbox. So some files or some content from the inbox has to be shown to the client. Remember, the client has only an exclusive access to read those content. No other person has an exclusive access to read or modify those content. There is some security issues that are going to arise there. So because your bean is proxying the client, and because your bean went to the database and opened those tables or records and showed it to the user, it is your duty to close that connection. So this place, that is the EJB passivate, this is a place wherein you can do a temporary closing down of some of the resources and allow the others to make use of the resource. So when you do that, after calling this method, EJB passivate, your bean is ready for the passivation, and the server takes the content. So whatever you may have, this ijk, int ijk, float xyz, all the values which are there in the fields of your class, that is the state of the class, is taken as it is and dumped to the disk, and it is pulled out of the memory. Now your bean will remain in that passivated state for a long time until the client returns back. So after half an hour, the client has completed typing all the letter, and then he clicks send now. So the client again magically appears back. Now when the client comes back, the server realizes that that bean that was dedicated to the client is no longer available. It is being passivated. So what it does is it recreates that entire object back. So it deserializes it back, gets all the values of ijk and xyz and recreates the object. But now there is a problem. Before your bean was sent to the disk, you have exclusively disconnected from the database, or you have exclusively closed some of the file. Now the server can't reopen it again because it doesn't know which table that you were reading and which file that you have opened. So it, before anything happens with the bean, so it deserializes it back, reestablish whatever it has done, it undoes its work. But whatever you have done in this method, that is passivate, you have to undo that thing. And how do you do that thing? Is it provides you with one more method. So it will call one more function found within your class. This is an exclusive call by the server. So if you have closed any database connection in the EJB passivate, you are supposed to re-establish those connections in the activate. So before your bean is sent to the passivation, it calls EJB passivate. But once your bean is brought back to the memory, before anybody else is made to any call, it calls this step, that is activate. Here you are supposed to get back the previous state, that is re-establish the connection with the database. Maybe if you have closed any files, open those files and maybe maintain all the details here. So these two, passivate and activate, are callback methods. What is the meaning of saying callback method? These are the methods that are directly called by the server, and you are supposed to provide these methods. So before your bean is passivated, it's going to call that method. Now if you say that no, in my bean or in my session bean, I am not using database, I am not using session, I am not using files, I am not using any resources, then just write a dummy method called EJB passivate. There is no step. EJB passivate, open and close a flower bracket. Okay, that's it. That method has nothing. The server will simply call that method, and because nothing has to be done, it goes on. So you are supposed to write these two. The last one is the EJB remove. Now again, this is called by the container. When the container says, when the client said goodbye to the session bean, I'm logging out, then you tell the container that, okay, it's all over. Okay, so the server has to pull out this bean out of the memory. Before your bean is forced out, remember there could be many reasons why the server will do it. One of the reasons the server will do it is when the session times out. See, no server will keep the session open forever. Maybe after 1 hour or after 2 hours, the server will get tired with the open connection, and it just says that the client is not going to come back, and I'm going to close this connection. So before your bean is, remember there is a destructor which goes with any object. Any object that you create will have the constructor. Before the object is destroyed, the JVM will perform this destructor, garbage collection, on its own. I'm not talking about those two things. They are part of any Java object. These are exclusive steps that have been called by the server. So before your bean is pulled out, it is given a last chance to do any housekeeping work. Maybe closing the database connection forever, closing all the files, closing the transaction, anything, whatever housekeeping work that you want to do before saying goodbye to the server. So that has to be written in this one. Now if you say that I have nothing to be done when my bean is destroyed, so don't worry, just write this EJB remove, keep the open and close flower bracket, and that's it. So the server will simply call that method and do it. So these are called as callback methods, and you are supposed to write that thing. Now this these methods are there apart from your business logic. These are the lifecycle methods which are called by the server. Apart from that, your bean is supposed to perform the business logic, because that's why you create a bean. It is supposed to do add, edit, delete, subtract, and all these things. So it is supposed to perform, and all of them are the business method. Now, this is what it looks like. Suppose if you have to create the 2.x version of the session bean or message driven bean or any bean for that matter, then you are supposed to write these methods. First of all, your session bean must implement EJB session, which is required. So there is no escape out of it. You are supposed to write EJB create. This is called immediately after the constructor when EJB when the context is given to you. If at all you want to do any routine work before starting out. EJB remove, EJB activate, you are supposed to write it. These are callback methods. Whether there is something that need to be performed or not, they have to be there. So there is no escape out of it. Apart from that, you are supposed to write some business logic. So this is your bean class. But that's not the end of it. Every bean must have its own interface. That's a client interface. The stub has to be there. So you need to create a stub. And the stub must be a removed stub. It must somehow be extended out of EJB object, or in other words, it must be a removed object. And you know very well, every method has to throw a remote exception. That is the part of it that is going to create a complication. That is two parts. But there is one more thing that has to be shown, and that is the home interface. This is the starting point wherein the client gets the access to it. So you need to do that thing, and there must be this create that is called by the client when everything fires up. So this is required. Apart from this, you need to configure your bean. What's the meaning of this? You must tell the server that my bean is available in this location, in this package, and this is the context and all the details how the bean must work. And this is called as a configuration information, and this is usually written in an XML format, and this is called as deployment descriptor. So this specifies when you deploy a bean, when you give your bean to the server will ask how am I going to use it, or what are the details. So you can say, okay, read the source code. The server say it is too much for me. So can you give me the details, how and when I'm supposed to call it, what is the context, and what are the who is supposed to use it, who is not supposed to use it, where is the package, and all those things. That details, the configuration information has to be specified here. So this is what was supposed to be done in a 2.x version of the bean. And when this model was proposed to most of the developers in the olden 2000 and during that day, most of the developers said, forget that bean and other thing, it is too much, I'm not going to develop anything on that. It's not really required. I will use ASP.NET, it is much easier to do. So people got fed up with that, because most of the time they are tied up with this business logic. That itself is too much for most of the developers. Apart from that, there are many housekeeping routines that they are supposed to do it. So just if your bean has one method, add two numbers, you are supposed to write these four methods. Extra method has to be there. Without that method, if you give it to the server will complain and say that you don't have EJB create object, I can't do it. I will allow anybody to access the bean only after I call this method. This is my routine. So if you like it or not, you put that method. I want it in the same signature. So that was too much. Then the Sun Microsystem during that time came up with an alternative option, and then it told the developer that, okay, you don't have to do all those things. We will give you a small shortcut. And that was when they started with the EJB version 3. In the EJB version 3, that's the current version that we are using, they just said that you forget about the home interface, that we will take care. The create and all those things we will take care. You don't write anything for that. So this is automatically given to you by the container. So your work of creating that interface is not there. Then they said, okay, you don't implement anything. You don't extend your bean from this session. So you get that. You don't get extended from this session or EJB object. Don't worry about our classes. We will take care of it. So you just write a plain Java class that any Java person is supposed to know. So you just write a plain class, that's all. Any ordinary class, how you write it, you just write that, you just write the business method inside it. Don't bother about whether it is Java X.EJB, session bean or other thing, that we will take care. So that is directly done. Okay, but what they told is now because you are doing it, your class in the olden days, you know very well, your bean was not implementing. You just recall what I told you. There is this bodyguard who knows about the remote interface, but the bean says I am least bothered about that interface. It is the bodyguard's problem. I have some method, bodyguard will take care of it. Now what is being done is they told the developer that because there is no bodyguard for your bean, see to it that whatever method that you are writing, you give an interface for that. Is it a difficult task? It is definitely not a difficult task. How do you create an interface? To create an interface, you just go and create interface, give a name of this interface, and in your class you just say my class implements that interface. What must be there in that interface? If you want this business method to be exposed out, if you want this business method to be exposed out in the interface, create one more class or create one more file. Just copy this header, public void, this part of your method and put it. Just copy paste. It's not going to take too much of time, and in fact, most of the IDEs will perform it for you. So that means to say that your business method that you are writing, you take care of it. You just give the reference of this, or you just give the signature of your business method, so that we are able to generate other objects for you. So that part everybody agreed. Okay, because I am writing a business method, I will say whether it will take int, float, or anything else. What is the return value out of it, and what's the name of it? It is definitely I have to write it once. Next time I have to just copy paste it to the other part. So it's not going to be a big problem. Then they said. So I will talk about these two parts. This is called as a class. If you look at this class now, this class is just an ordinary class without extending out of any EJB session or anything. This type of class is called as Pojo class. Pojo is plain old Java object. This is now not a exclusive EJB object. It is an ordinary Java class that you are writing. So anybody, maybe a 9th standard student who has studied something about Java will be able to create this object. So without knowing, unknowingly they are going to create it, because they are going to just type public class and class name and add two numbers. Then they say int public int add numbers, int x int y, and they will write it. So their class itself is also a plain old Java object. What you are writing is also a ordinary Java object. It's a plain old Java object. Why it is a plain old Java object? Because you are not giving an exclusive tag to this object. You are not saying that this is for EJB session, EJB it is extending or it is implementing. Nothing of that type is told to the system, or you don't have to bother about it. The other one is called as Poji. The word is again same, plain old Java interface. It's just a plain interface that you are writing. So that is what they said. So they said you just create a plain or ordinary Java object and interface. Rest we will take care. Then the developers complain. Okay, what about these methods now? Who is going to write these methods? These are not my methods. Only this part is my method. This part is my method. The other part is not my method. Who is going to write it? Then they said, okay, forget all those things. We will also take care of it. I will come back to this stateless. Don't worry about that. Okay? They said you don't write all those methods. Okay? If you don't want, you don't write it. If you want, you write it. What is the meaning of it? If you are making a connection with the database, and if you feel that your object will be fascinated, then write a method. Otherwise, don't write a method. Should I write it with the same name? Remember, in the olden days, it was the same name. You can't change the name. Even if you make a spelling mistake, it's all gone, because the server knows only that EJB remove, EJB password as it is. It's going to call only that method. It knows that that method is there inside your object. It will not introspect your object and find out whether the method is there or not. It's not going to do it. So if you make one small spelling mistake, it's all gone. So now they said that, okay, forget it. You don't have to write that. So that means you just write in a simple word. You just write the business method, but there was a small problem with it. Now, when you write a business method and you are just writing a plain ordinary Java object and just give it to the server must somehow magically get the sense that maybe the sixth sense is must start up with sixth sense and must realize, okay, this is stateless, this is stateful, this is EJB and other things. So what they said is just put one annotation, this is called as an annotation, in front of your class. So just tell the server that what type of bean it is. Is it a EJB, is it a stateless, or is it a stateful? So just put this thing. So at stateful, just put one word, and people said, okay, just one word, no, I will type it. Again, on your remote interface, there is no reference because you are not saying it is extending or it is implementing anything. It's just a plain interface. The server, when you give the interface to the server must know that this interface is for the stuff. So just add one extra thing called at remote. One line there, one extra line in front of your class, just add at remote. That's called as an annotation. You do that. Then the people said, why you require that? Then they said that, okay, if you do this, if you write these two lines, there is no need for deployment descriptor. You don't have to learn about XML. You can get rid of the learning curve of developing an XML and doing all the configuration. With these two words, you can get rid of those 2 files. So from the 4 files, we are reducing it back to 2 files. So in the olden days, you are supposed to create at minimum 4 files. Now you are supposed to create only 2 files. The remaining is all taken care. So this is or maybe compressed version of the class, and there is no shortcut. After this, they said there is no shortcut. If you after this you don't like it, don't worry about it. Go to ASP.NET and start writing that thing. So there is no more shortcut from our side. So this 2 things. So as of now, if you are writing a Java object or if you're creating a EJB, then you are responsible for doing this. What is it? You are responsible for creating a class, definitely, and you are supposed to create a business method. That is directly it is there, and you are supposed to put a tag saying that what type of bean it is. It is stateless, stateful, or EJB, or anything that to give that thing, and create a interface for that, and just put a at remote in front of it. The remaining is always taken care. So other part you don't have to bother. Rest of them is automatically taken care by the J2E or the Java E architecture. So the rest automatically gets configured for you. So your work is reduced. Now what is this Pojo object? Pojo object already known, plain old Java object. What are these plain old Java objects? What do we mean by that? It is an object that does not extend out of any specialized class or interface. So it is an ordinary class. So how you write, how you've been writing all your Java classes, that is what is Pojo classes. Now if you take this example, class my servlet extends HTTP servlet. This is not a Pojo class. Why? HTTP servlet is an exclusive class that is available under the Java EE architecture. So it's a class which is there. So this can't be. Again, if you write my remote implement session bean, it can't be, because session bean is something that is part of the Java EE architecture. What is Pojo is something that you are just writing your business logic without bothering about what is Java architecture and what it has to do with your program. If you write an ordinary business method inside a class, then that class is the Pojo class. If you write an interface, then it is a Pojo. Okay, that is as simple as that. Again, when you write the interface, you are not bothered about the remote exceptions and all those things. You just write the interface, that's all. Ordinary interface, and then make use of it. What is the benefit? The benefit is when you create the Pojos, remember you have to put the annotation. The automatic persistence is handled by the server. Server will handle the transaction for you. Server will handle the persistence for you. Server will handle everything. So all of them are automatic settings. So when you say this is my object, when you say it is my session, at session, that means it's going to maintain the session for you. How it's going to maintain, it's not your problem. It's going to do it. It's guaranteed by the Sun microsystem. Any server will recognize at session. That means then onwards it knows what has to be done. The other good thing about it is whenever you write those kind of ordinary classes, you don't bother about EJB altogether because EJB is not coming into picture. You are just writing your own business logic. So you are just involved in your business logic without giving a second thought to the entire architecture. So it decouples your business logic from the other things. Okay. Again, there is no need to bother about JNDI. What is the naming directory? How do I search for the naming directory? What is the structure? All those things are not required because you are not going to write any home interface. So it is your burden has been reduced to a very great extent in a very simple way. You just bother about your business logic. The rest of them you leave it to the Java EE architecture. It will take care of. Okay. The other good thing about it is. If in the olden days, if they want to test it, remember, whenever we want to write a business logic, we can't directly implement it on the server. It has to be thorough checked. Without testing, you can't write a business or create an application because, say, writing a banking online banking software without testing, if you try to do it after 4 months, if you just realize that there is a major bug in it, by then it is too late. Already 10 and maybe millions of users have already created their account. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to ask them to recreate the account? They will go to other bank and create their account because they now will lose confidence in your bank altogether. So without testing, you can't do it. But in the olden days, if you want to test it, you have to have the server, you have to have the entire thing, and you have to write this EJB, remove, add, persistent, everything. Then that part is there. After that, your testing will start. So it was too much. Okay. Now, because it's an ordinary Java class, it can be directly tested in your JVM itself. You are just testing the feasibility of your method. Is it adding a client? Is it deleting a account? Is it depositing it? Is it withdrawing? So you are just checking the ordinary Java methods, which can be tested directly outside the server. You don't need a server to test your, and in the last semester you have written so many Java classes or you have done that. You never bothered about the servers. So you were writing it and you were executing it. The same thing, write and execute, finally you put the add session and give it to the server. The rest of the magic is automatically done. So the good part of it is flexible. You can use this annotation idea in anywhere. So one of the major things that is being used up is this annotation. Before I go into that annotation, why that annotation is there, remember you can create your own annotations. I'm not going to go in depth into it, how to create the annotation, but the annotations are there to help you out with the coding. When you put the annotation, most of the work is automatically done by the server for you. So let's look at what is the annotation. Annotation is the way in which you describe the code. The word is a bit difficult to understand. So if you say you describe the code, to whom you are describing? You are describing your code to the server, you are describing it to the compiler. So you disclose what your program is going to do. Now you may say that is done in the Java code. I am writing the Java int float. When I say int x, that is the meaning that itself will describe to the compiler that it has to reserve 4 bytes of memory. So that is there. So apart from that, what is that I am supposed to do? Whenever you write the code, maybe in the last semester when you wrote the code, you used to write the comments. So usually you write the comment and you put the comment. This is the step for calculating standard deviation. So you write at the top. So when when others try to read that comment, they will understand, okay, this step is for standard deviation. Maybe this one is for some other computation, statistical computation. You put some comments. Now, comments are there to describe your code, describe your method, but that will describe those code and methods to the next developer, or maybe to you, or maybe someone junior who is going to look into that code later. So maybe when you resign and go to other company, somebody has to scratch their head to solve correct the bugs. So they will get the idea. Okay, this is what this person was trying to do. So this will describe it to the developer. But if you extend this logic, suppose if I have to describe this to a server, how do I do it? If I put it inside a comment, and you know very well, comments are there only for humans. Comments won't reach the source code. The minute you give the comments to the compiler, the first thing the compiler will do is remove all the comments from the code, and it will say, just give me the code, leave the comment to yourself. So you can't think of putting a comment and tell the server, remember, server is a machine or the process that is working, and you say this is the stateful bin. The comments are not going to reach there. So somehow you have to have a method, you devise some method in such a way that when you put the, when you describe your program, it has to reach or it has to cross this compiler. Remember, if you put it in as a comment, compiler will strip it off. So somehow you have to devise the technique in such a way that it will reach, it will bypass this compiler and reach to the other side. How do you do it? Is using the annotation. So annotation, in other words, a very simple word. Annotation is a metadata. What is a metadata? Data about the data, data that describes the data. In your database, that notion is very simple. When you create a table, you are saying int and float and other. That is your data. Then you describe it to the, you tell the customer this is integer, but you describe it to the database engine that this is int 5 or maybe numeric 10 and so on. So that is what you are trying to do, and that is what is the